Howdy everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm pretty sure most of y'all have heard the story about Alec Baldwin recently on the set of Rust, where he discharged a prop gun, killing one person and injuring another. And so I kind of was thinking about providing my own thoughts, but I came across this podcast from Tom Gresham of Gun Talk TV. Tom is a nationally recognized firearms expert. It's actually one of the first radio shows that I ever started listening to when I got into guns. He was on a podcast with Kennedy, the old MTV radio VJ. He was on a podcast with her, and Tom just does a better job than I could do talking about what was going on, his thoughts on the entire thing. So I've kind of spliced it up. This is a great video for you guys just to press play if you're driving, listen to, go do something else while you're listening to what's going on, because I'm going to play the podcast, but there's not going to be much video to it. So I'm going to break it up into the different segments for you guys. So in this first clip, Tom talks about Hollywood and kind of their demonization of firearms. Check it out.
Well, it's one of the ongoing ironies of the movie world and the people in the industry. They demonize guns and they badmouth gun owners and they mock the very idea of self-defense with firearms, all the while making millions and billions of dollars, glamorizing guns and glamorizing violence. And then they turn back around and say, you people are too stupid to know how to handle firearms. And while the irony in this is tempting and almost delicious, I think we probably ought to put that aside because it's too serious an issue to sit there and say, well, gee, we see what Alec Baldwin has done in the past. No. I'm right there with you. Look, a young woman has died and we need to figure out what happened. And the reason you study accidents or mishaps, because I don't really think this was really an accident, I think it was negligence as opposed to an accident. The reason you study that is so that you don't repeat it again.
Next, he talks about whether this was an accident or complete negligence.
Okay, well, people talk about a firearms accident versus negligence. People who are gun people don't talk about accidents, because an accident is when a gun falls off a table and goes off. That's not what happened. If somebody pulls the trigger on a gun and shoots somebody unintentionally, it's negligence. It is not an accident. It may be unintended, but it is most certainly not an accident. The gun didn't just go off, as they often say. Guns don't just go off unless they do. Well, actually, guns do exactly what you tell them to do. If you pull the trigger, they go bang, and that's what happened in this case. But now you start tracking back and say, how did it get to that point? I'm going to be contrarian here just a little bit. I don't really put a lot of this blame on Alec Baldwin. In the real world, there's the real world and there's the movie world. In the real world, yes. If someone hands me a gun and says this gun is unloaded, I don't believe him. I don't trust him. I am going to check the action. I'm going to make sure. I'm going to verify for myself. That is not what happens in movies. And I could actually make the argument that's probably not what should happen, because you should have a prop master or an armorer who really knows this stuff, who literally places the gun into the hand of the actor, and when the scene's over, takes the gun out of the hand of the actor. And do you really want an actor who knows zip, zero, nada about guns to be checking it, fiddling with it, pointing it hither and yon? There's a trust factor that has to be, maintained through this whole thing. That whole thing broke down here, didn't it?
Here, Tom talks about the armorer who was on set, Hannah Gutierrez, and kind of who is responsible for this whole thing.
As an actor, I take the responsibility off of Baldwin. There's a whole other subject matter, which is, as producer, did he hire the right people, et cetera, with the crew? But in this particular chain of events, or we call it an accident chain, the responsibility, I think, is going to end up falling on the armorer, Gutierrez, who, interestingly enough, is the daughter of one of the most famous armorers in Hollywood, Thel Reed, who was a competitive shooter, and his name is known throughout firearm circles. So you've got that interesting, weird connection. So her and obviously Dave Halls. And then at the very end of the chain is Alec Baldwin, who has a trust factor and says, okay, he's handed me a cold gun. Generally speaking, actors don't check those. As I say, that's not real world, and we wouldn't do that normally, but that's just where it is. As far as legal responsibility, well, that's a whole nother thing. And you got to know that everybody's circling their lawyers, and insurance companies are, girding their loins and ready for the lawsuits that are going to be coming.
Next, Tom's talked about how do you deal with actors and guns in Hollywood when you're on a set? What's the right way to go about it?
Well, let me back up. I have produced and directed hundreds and hundreds of videos and television shows with firearms in them, with live firearms. We use real guns shooting real bullets in the videos we do. So I'm very familiar with how you keep people from getting shot. Okay. Let me explain. I went to a school one time that was for actors and stunt people on how to shoot guns and how to use guns safely and how to look real. It was horrible. The people who were teaching it knew nothing about guns. We actually left early because I was too afraid that somebody would get shot at this school for actors and stuntmen on firearms. It was that bad.
Where was
Here's
it?
the thing. This was actually just outside of New Orleans, where they had a pretty good film industry going on there. Here's the thing. If you are not really seriously into guns, let me just say this really clearly. Everything you know about guns is wrong, because nature abhors a vacuum. We have a vacuum in what we know, and what's it get filled with? It gets filled with the nonsense of movies and TV and what you see there and gun handling on that. And it's all wrong and it's all dangerous. And if you don't have really serious formal training in this, you're probably going to get it wrong and you're going to be unsafe.
All right, this next one's a pretty good one. Tom talks about the 4 firearm safety rules, but in the context in which they are applied for sets like Hollywood. And I like his response, because one of the things that pissed me off is that when this incident happened, a lot of right-wing pundits were coming out, virtue signaling, talking down on Alec Baldwin. And once again, I really don't care for the guy, but they were trying to basically say because he didn't know firearms, this happened. Well, guys, you got to realize in this situation, or with these 4 rules of firearm safety, there's a context in which they are applied. Perfect example, simunitions, UTMs. It's basically like grown-up paintball, right? Well, if you ever do force on force, you have a self-check, a buddy check, and an instructor check. Also, no live firearms are allowed anywhere on premises. They better be like locked up in your car. Nothing is allowed on site because they're trying to check, double check, and triple check to make sure that nothing can go wrong. So here Tom talks about like the 4 safety rules and the context in which you deal with this.
In the real world, we have our 4 rules of gun safety. Number 1, all guns are always loaded. Number 2, don't point a gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. So yes, but in the movies, they do point guns at people, and that's why you have a person who is there to make sure these guns are safe when they do that. It's not the real world, and we have to kind of separate the two things. And because of that's why, look, I would love to be able to blame Alec Baldwin on this because of the way that he has hammered legitimate, honest, responsible gun owners throughout the years. But I really don't think that's where the blame lies in this case. It just I don't think it is.
Here, Tom talks about kind of what he thinks is going to happen next and what does Hollywood do to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
I think you're going to see the entire movie industry take a real hard look at their safety protocols. You also are going to find a lot of crew members, which a lot of them did on this case. They walked off the set because of safety concerns, among others. I think a lot of them are going to say, if don't feel safe, we're not going to work there, which is great. On our sets, I tell everybody, camera operator, sound, anybody, everybody has the ability to call cut and stop at any time because of safety concerns. If you're worried about something, we will stop. We will figure it out. And we'll go from there. Anybody on the set could do that because everybody is at risk if we're not doing it right. So speak up. I think you're going to see that on a lot of movie sets. You're going to, there are calls, of course. Look, what did Hollywood do as a result of this? We already have people saying, well, we should not have any guns on the sets, period.
Yeah, that's what people are saying. So what do you do?
So they went to a gun ban. That's what they do. They want to ban guns everywhere. Now they're saying, well, gee, we're not even responsible enough to handle these guns. Well, may or may not be true. But rather than going to education or doing something responsibly, they move to a ban, which is what they've done in the real world. Oh, people, we don't trust you, so we're going to ban your guns. So I think what they're going to do is going to institute new programs. You're going to see probably the unions all across the board in the movie industry are going to require better training, going to require better armorers.
This last segment, they talk about kind of where does Alec Baldwin go from here? Is his career over? Does he just kind of get a, slap on the wrist? What's going to happen from here?
Yes, but Hollywood has a way of forgiving its own. And I think that 2, 4, 5 years down the line, he's back as strong as ever. And they will say, oh, that poor guy, we got to cut him a break. I mean, they just do not eat their own. They just don't. And so I think we're going to see him back as strong as ever at some point when he gets through this whole mess. It'll take a while, but I think he'll be back. And but if we get some decent safety protocols coming out of this, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Guys, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it. I know this is a little bit different video, but I wanted to get it out to you. Tom's a lot more polished than I do, and to be honest with you, the way he explains things, he has a lot more compassion than me. But I just wanted to share with y'all. I know maybe y'all seen this story or not. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Be safe, be smart, be skilled. Catch you on the next one.